Well, hey there, kiddos. Here is your last video on solving quadratics. We're going to talk about the back side of your foldable today, and we're going to do solving by graphing. Excuse me. And so we're on the, again, like I said, we're on the back side of your foldable, and you're also going to need a calculator. If you've got yours with you, you should get it out because it's going to be very important as we move through this lesson. So the roots, zeros, or x-intercepts are also called the solutions of the equation. We've talked about this a lot, but all four of those words mean the exact same thing. So it doesn't matter which one you see, they all mean the same thing. They mean find the x-intercepts. Where does this graph cross the x-axis? So number one here, they give you a graph and it says find the zeros of the graph below. Well, the zeros are just the x-intercepts, and there are two of them, one here and one here. And so the zeros for this graph, the first one on the left is over here at -1, -2, -3. And then the other one is right here at the origin, which is at 0, 0. And so and they're called zeros because the y value of both of those points is 0. Number two asks you just to sketch this graph, and then it asks for the x and the y intercepts. So we're going to get out our calculator and we're going to type in that equation. So we're going to go to y equals, and we're going to type in this equation, -x squared plus 4x, and we have to subtract 4 from both sides so that this is in standard form. So it's -x squared plus 4x minus 4. That's what's going to go in our calculator. So we have -x squared plus 4x minus 4. And then we're going to graph it and just see what it looks like. If when you graph, your graph doesn't look exactly like mine, then I want you to press zoom and 6 so that it'll reset your window to match mine. This gives you a 10 by 10 window so that this goes from -10 to +10, and so does your y-axis, so it's really easy to count. It's a nice easy window to see what's happening. And so I'm going to sketch this graph. It looks like it crosses the y-axis at -1, 2, 3, 4, and it touches the x-axis at 2. So when I sketch it, it's going to cross the y-axis here, and it's going to touch the x-axis right here. And so when I graph it, that's what I want to see. Goes up to here, bounces, and comes back down, and I hope that you draw better than I do. So hopefully you draw better than I do, but we can see by looking at our picture that the x-intercept is right here where it touches the x-axis at 2, 0. And the y-intercept is down here at 0, -4. So now let's get into the real meat of what's happening and how to find the zeros using our calculator. So the next question, we're going to complete the table that includes the solutions. How I know it includes the solutions is it's going to be where y equals 0. The solutions are always going to be where y equals 0. And so we're going to complete the table for this equation, and then we're going to find the solution. So I have x squared minus 6 equals 0. So I'm going to go back to my calculator. We're going to go back to y equals, and we're going to type in that new equation, which is x squared minus 6 x. Almost left off an important part. And then we're just going to go to the table. Second graph will take us to our table, and we're going to fill in the values that we have that we need here. So it starts at -1. So at -1, when x is -1, y is 7. When x is 0, y is 0. When x is 1, y is -5. When x is 2, y is -8. And when x is 5, y is -5. I'm also going to add an extra value to here for the 6, because I can see by looking at my calculator when x is 6, y equals 0, which tells me that's going to be the other solution. So it crosses the x-axis twice, once here and once here. And I saw those in my table, and so my two solutions are going to be at 0, 0 and at 6, 0. And so all I did was I looked in my table on my calculator for where did y equal 0. So quadratics can have, and we learned this yesterday, it can have 1, none, or 2 solutions. And I probably could have written that in a better order, but those are my options. It can have 1 solution, like the example right here, where it just touched the x-axis 1 time. It can have no solutions, where when you graph it, it doesn't ever come close to the x-axis, or it can have 2 solutions like this one, where it crosses the x-axis twice. So those are your options. And so now we're going to solve some equations using our calculator. We're not going to factor, we're not going to do the quadratic formula, we're just going to use our calculator. And so step number 1 says to solve for y or for 0, and to get that equation into y equals. So you always want the y to be by itself. So you want everything on one side. So number 4 is good. We're going to type this equation into our calculator, 5x squared plus 29x plus 20. So we're going to go to y equals. So we have 5x squared plus 29x plus 20. Let me make sure I typed that correctly. And then we're going to graph it so that we can see what it looks like. And you cannot see the entire parabola, but that's okay, we don't need to. What we need to see are these 2 points right here where it crosses the x-axis. It crosses the x-axis here and here, and those are the 2 points we wanted to see. So we're going to find those, and if you look at our steps, it says to plug into y2, make y2 0. So on our calculator, we're going to go back to y equals, and in y2, we're going to plug in 0. Then mine is going to show up. When I graph, you're going to see a red line draw across here. Yours will not show up because what it's doing is drawing a line right on the x-axis, and so you're going to have a line on the x-axis that you will never see. It's not a big deal. Your calculator knows it's there. So we're going to press second trace, and we want the intersection because we're looking for the point where this parabola intersects that red line. So I'm going to do the intersection. And we've done this before with straight lines, and when we did it with straight lines, we went enter, 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 and called it a day. We can't do that here because we have 2 intersection points, and we'll have to tell it which one to look at. So we're going to hit enter twice, 1, 2. When it says guess at the bottom, you want to use your left and right arrow keys to get your cursor near the intersection you want. I always do the left one first. You don't have to, but that's what I do. So I've got my cursor now over here on the left intersection, then hit enter. And it tells me that that intersection is at negative 5, 0. So one of my solutions is at negative 5, 0. Now let's find the other solution. We're going to do it again, second trace, option 5. We're going to hit enter twice, 1, 2, and then we're going to arrow over to the right so we can get this one way over here on the right. And we hit enter again, and we get that that one is at negative 0.8 and 0. And so my other solution is at negative 0.8, comma 0. So those are my 2 solutions. So number 5 here, number 5 says negative x squared minus 5 equals negative 4x. Well, I've got to get this negative 4x to the other side, so I'm going to add 4x. So this will become negative x squared plus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Now I can plug it into y equals. So in y equals, I'm going to put negative x squared plus 4x minus 5. So y1 becomes negative x squared plus 4x minus 5. And y2 is going to stay 0. I want to keep that there. And then I'm going to hit graph so I can see what happens. And so here's my picture. That's what I ended up with. And hopefully you notice that this parabola right here never touches the x-axis. And since it never touches the x-axis, I don't have intersection points. And since I don't have intersection points, this problem right here has no solution. It doesn't cross the x-axis. So if I were to have used the quadratic formula for this, I would have ended up with a negative under the square root symbol. And that's how I got no solution. So last one, I have this x squared equals positive 4. Well, I've got to get that to equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract 4. So I have x squared minus 4 equals 0. And so I'm going to grab my calculator. I'm going to type that in. And so I have x squared minus 4. My minus sign disappeared, minus 4. And I'm going to leave that y2 equals 0. I'm going to graph it so I can make sure I can see my intersection points. And I can. There are 2 of them. And I'm going to have to find them both. So we'll do it again. We're going to hit second trace. We want the intersection. We're going to hit enter twice. 1, 2. And then we want to move our cursor over to the one on the left and hit enter again. and we get that the first one is at -2. So my first solution is at -2, 0. Then we're going to do it again. So we're going to go second trace, number 5, enter, 1, 2, and then I'm going to move over towards this intersection over here on the right. I'm going to hit enter again, and I see that my next intersection is at 2, 0, and so that's the other one. So I have two solutions, one at 2, 0, one at -2, 0, and that's how you use your calculator to find them. It is the easiest way to solve a quadratic, but it is not the only way. It is also not always the best way. You all have to do several things. You have to make sure you look at how your answer choices are presented to you. It's like I told you in the video yesterday, sometimes when it's a quadratic formula problem, they leave the answer in that unsimplified form, and your calculator won't give you that. It'll give you a decimal. Sometimes quadratic formula is just easier. Sometimes the square root method is just easier, but this is another method. It's usually everybody's favorite. It's the one you want to get really good at because it helps you. So we'll practice this when y'all come to class tomorrow. I will see you then.